Come on, Rebecca. We're not stopping again until we get there. Marcus's voice boomed from the driver's seat, sharp with irritation, his knuckles whitening as they gripped the steering wheel tightly. I sat in the back of his dusty old pickup truck, wedged uncomfortably between his brothers, Nathan and Austin, their broad shoulders pressing against me, leaving me little room to breathe. The familiar knot of anxiety twisted in my stomach, growing tighter with every mile we traveled through the scorching desert. It was only 9 a.m., but the Nevada heat was already oppressive, seeping through the cracked windows and making the air inside the truck feel like a furnace. We were on a road trip to Las Vegas, a trip I never wanted to take, a trip that felt more like a punishment than a vacation. My name is Rebecca Torres, I'm 33 years old, and I've been married to Marcus Collins for 3 long, exhausting years. What began as a loving, hopeful relationship had slowly morphed into something unrecognizable, something that left me questioning who I was and how I'd ended up here. Our marriage hadn't always been this way. In the beginning, Marcus was charming, attentive, the kind of man who made me believe in a future filled with shared dreams. But over time, that charm faded, replaced by a cold indifference that crept into our daily lives. Marcus worked as a junior accountant at a small firm in Phoenix, Arizona, a job he complained about constantly, while I had put my MBA studies on hold to keep our household afloat. It was a sacrifice I made willingly at first, believing it was temporary, believing Marcus when he promised my dreams would have their turn. But that turn never came. Instead, his brothers, Nathan and Austin, became fixtures in our home, their visits growing more frequent, their presence more oppressive. Together, the 3 of them developed a cruel, biting sense of humor, one that always seemed to find me as the target. Their jokes weren't playful, they were sharp, personal, designed to cut deep and leave me feeling small. I learned to swallow my hurt, to stay silent, because speaking up only made it worse. Seriously, Rebecca, you have the bladder of a toddler, Austin sneered, jabbing his elbow into my ribs with a force that made me wince. Maybe you should wear diapers next time we go somewhere. Nathan roared with laughter from my other side, his amusement echoing through the cramped cab. That would actually be hilarious. Can you imagine? Their words stung, burning my cheeks with humiliation, but I bit my lip and stayed quiet. Years of experience had taught me that defending myself only fueled their cruelty. I glanced at Marcus in the rearview mirror, hoping, praying he'd intervene, that he'd tell his brothers to stop. But instead, he caught my eye and smirked, a cold, dismissive twist of his lips, before cranking up the radio to drown out any chance of conversation. The truck hit a rough patch of highway, jostling me between Nathan and Austin, their bodies taking up even more space, as if they enjoyed making me feel trapped. Austin's elbow dug into me again, harder this time, while Nathan spread his legs wider, forcing me into an even tighter corner. When I tried to shift, to find some semblance of comfort, they both acted as if I was the one being inconsiderate, rolling their eyes and muttering under their breath. Look, there's a rest stop coming up, I said, my voice trembling as I pointed to a faded sign that read Barstow Rest Area, 2 miles. Could we please stop? I really need to use the bathroom, and I could stretch my legs. My words were soft, almost pleading, but they carried the weight of my desperation to escape the suffocating tension in the truck. Marcus's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror again, and for a moment, I thought I saw something cold, something unsettling flicker across his face. Fine, he said slowly, his voice low, a strange smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. We'll stop at Barstow. You can have all the time you need. Nathan and Austin exchanged a glance, a look that sent a shiver down my spine, but I was too relieved at the thought of a break to dwell on it. I had no idea that this simple, innocent request would become the catalyst for the most devastating, yet ultimately transformative, day of my life. The rest stop appeared like a mirage in the endless desert. A small oasis of concrete and sparse shade surrounded by miles of barren, sun-scorched land. As Marcus pulled into the parking lot, I noticed how eerily isolated the place was. Only 2 other vehicles sat in the lot, a couple of semi-trucks parked far from each other, and the nearest town felt like it was a world away. The heat shimmered off the asphalt in relentless waves, distorting the distant mountains into a surreal, dancing horizon. "Thank you," I said softly as I climbed out of the truck, my legs stiff and aching from the cramped ride. I took a moment to stretch, grateful to escape the suffocating atmosphere inside the cab, even if just for a few minutes. "Take your time," Marcus called after me, that strange, unnerving smile still plastered on his face. "We're not in any hurry." Nathan and Austin had climbed out too, standing near the front of the truck, their voices low, their eyes darting toward me every few seconds as they suppressed laughter. A chill of unease ran through me, but I pushed it aside, telling myself they were just planning another one of their childish pranks. Maybe they'd hide and jump out to scare me or leave something disgusting in my seat. I'd endured worse from them before. The restroom was surprisingly clean for such a remote location, a small mercy in an otherwise grueling day. I took a few extra minutes to splash cool water on my face and neck, trying to wash away the heat and the lingering sting of their words. The desert sun was already oppressive, and I dreaded the thought of climbing back into that truck for another several hours. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. The confident, ambitious Rebecca, who had once dreamed of finishing her MBA and starting her own business, was gone, replaced by someone who tiptoed around her own life, walking on eggshells to avoid the next round of mockery from her husband and his brothers. When had I become so small? When had I stopped fighting back? I thought of the woman I used to be, the one who graduated summa cum laude from Arizona State University with a degree in finance, who had been accepted into their MBA program with a partial scholarship. Marcus had convinced me to defer my enrollment, promising it was temporary. "We need the income right now," he'd said. "You can always go back to school later." That was 3 years ago, and later had never come. Instead, I worked part-time at a grocery store, barely making enough to cover my own expenses, while Marcus pursued his accounting career. And his brothers never missed a chance to remind me I was just a college dropout working minimum wage. I dried my hands and steeled myself for the return to the truck, clinging to a fragile hope that things might get better. Maybe if I endured this trip, Marcus would finally see how his brothers treated me and put a stop to it. Maybe when we got home, I could have that long overdue conversation about returning to school. I walked out of the restroom and toward the parking lot, squinting against the harsh desert sun. But as I reached the spot where Marcus had parked, my heart stopped. The parking lot was empty, save for the 2 semi-trucks I'd noticed earlier. For a moment, I stood frozen, confusion clouding my mind. Had I gotten turned around? But no, this was the exact spot. I could see the tire tracks in the sandy gravel, the discarded cigarette, but Austin had flicked out the window, the faint oil stain where the truck had idled. They were gone. My heart began to race as I spun around, scanning the rest area for any sign of the familiar blue pickup truck. Maybe they'd moved to another parking spot. Maybe this was just another cruel prank, and they'd come speeding back any second, laughing at my panic. But as the minutes ticked by, the desert silence pressing in around me, the horrible truth sank in. They had left me here, 315 miles from home, in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but the clothes on my back and my small purse. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my phone, struggling to unlock the screen. No signal. Of course, there was no signal. This was the kind of place where cell towers were a distant dream. I ran to the edge of the parking lot, hoping to catch a glimpse of taillights fading down the highway, but there was nothing, just endless asphalt stretching toward the horizon, heat waves distorting the landscape into a surreal blur of beige and brown. The temperature was climbing toward 100 degrees, and it wasn't even noon. I knocked on the doors of the 2 semi-trucks, desperate for help, but no one answered, likely asleep in their cabs, escaping the midday heat. The rest area's small visitor center was locked, a sign indicating limited hours of operation. I sank onto a concrete bench in the shade of the building, my mind racing as I tried to process what had happened. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't one of their usual jokes that would be forgotten by tomorrow. This was something else, something cruel, calculated, and utterly unthinkable. In my purse, I found my wallet with $23 in cash, a credit card Marcus controlled, and an empty water bottle I drained earlier in the journey. No phone signal, no transportation, no way to contact anyone for help. The nearest sign of civilization was a gas station shimmering in the distance, miles away. Like another cruel mirage. As the heat grew unbearable, the concrete bench too hot to sit on, I moved to a small patch of shade near the restrooms, my throat dry and my head pounding from dehydration. Every car that passed on the highway was a potential lifeline, but none slowed down. To them, I was just another rest stop visitor, not a woman abandoned in the desert. I tried waving my arms, stepping closer to the road, but drivers either didn't see me or chose to ignore my distress. A professional-looking woman in a silver sedan avoided my gaze. A family in a minivan with children pressed against the windows sped past without a glance. I began to understand why Marcus had chosen this rest stop. It was remote enough to leave me stranded, but not so isolated that my disappearance would immediately raise alarms. Then I heard the low rumble of a diesel engine and the hiss of air brakes. A large semi-truck with Texas plates pulled into the rest area, and a surge of hope mixed with fear coursed through me. I'd heard horror stories about women accepting rides from strangers, but my situation was desperate. The driver, a man in his late 50s with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, climbed down from the cab. His denim shirt was clean and pressed, and he moved with the calm deliberation of someone accustomed to long, solitary hours on the road. "You okay, miss?" he asked, his gentle Texas drawl cutting through the silence. "You look like you've been out here a while." My throat was so dry I could barely speak, managing only a croak. The man, Samuel Rodriguez, reached into his truck and handed me a cold bottle of water from a small cooler. I drank greedily, the cool liquid a lifeline in the oppressive heat. "Easy there," he said kindly. "You'll make yourself sick drinking too fast in this heat. What happened to your ride?" When I managed to tell him my story, his expression shifted from concern to quiet anger. "They just left you here? Your own husband." He shook his head in disgust. "That's not a prank, miss. That's criminal. You could die out here." Samuel owned a large ranch outside Fresno, California, and was on his way back from delivering agricultural equipment to a farm in Nevada. The rest stop was on his route. "Home. I can't in good conscience leave you here," he said. "But I understand if you're hesitant to accept a ride from a stranger. We can call the police at the next town, let them sort this out." The idea of involving the police terrified me. What would I say? That my husband abandoned me as a joke? How could I prove it was intentional? "I'd be grateful for a ride," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I should probably call my husband first, let him know I'm okay." Samuel's expression darkened. "Miss, with all due respect, a man who'd leave his wife in the desert isn't someone you need to be checking in with." As Samuel's truck pulled away from the rest area, I felt a strange mix of relief and terror. I was escaping the immediate danger of the desert heat, but I was also crossing a point of no return. There was no pretending Marcus's actions were forgivable, no going back to the life I'd known. Samuel was a thoughtful companion, sensing my need for silence as I processed the day's events. He kept the air conditioning on full blast and handed me another bottle of water without prompting. The CB radio crackled with occasional trucker chatter, but otherwise, we rode in comfortable silence as the desert landscape gradually gave way to greener, more varied terrain. "I've been driving these roads for 30 years, Samuel said after a while, his voice steady and reassuring. "Seen all kinds of people in all kinds of situations, but what your husband did, that's not normal. That's the kind of thing that escalates." His words sent a chill through me because I knew he was right. The pranks, the jokes, the constant belittling, they'd grown meaner, more personal, over the past year. Marcus had started involving his brothers more, turning our home into a place where I was always on guard. I'd told myself it was just immaturity, that he'd outgrow it. But abandoning me in the desert wasn't immaturity, it was cruelty with intent to harm. "Do you have family you can stay with?" Samuel asked gently. "Somewhere safe to go while you figure out your next move?" I shook my head. My parents had died in a car accident 5 years earlier, and I had no siblings. Marcus's family was the only family I had left, and they clearly saw me as disposable. My college friends had drifted away, partly due to distance, partly because Marcus disapproved of my spending time with them. What about work? Samuel continued. Do you have a job to go back to? The question stung, highlighting how dependent I'd become. My part-time grocery store job barely covered my expenses, and Marcus controlled all our major financial accounts. I had one credit card with a low limit, every purchase scrutinized. I was studying finance before I got married, I said quietly. I planned to finish my MBA, maybe start an investment consulting business someday, but that was a long time ago. Samuel glanced at me with interest. Finance, huh? That's interesting. I could use someone with financial knowledge on my ranch. Been trying to expand, diversify into new crops, but I don't know much about investment strategies or business planning. Been flying by the seat of my pants for 25 years. It was the first time in years someone had valued my education, my potential. Marcus had dismissed my dreams as fantasies. His brothers mocked my achievements, but this stranger saw something in me. I'm probably rusty, I admitted. It's been 3 years since I was in school. Samuel smiled. Knowledge like that doesn't just disappear. Sometimes a fresh perspective is exactly what a business needs. Tell you what, you help me with some financial planning, and I'll make sure you have a place to stay while you get back on your feet. Fair trade. For the first time since Marcus drove away, I felt a glimmer of hope. Samuel's ranch was a marvel, thousands of acres in California's Central Valley, a masterpiece of agricultural engineering with sprawling fields, modern irrigation systems, and equipment that gleamed under the sun. The main house was a large, welcoming adobe structure surrounded by shade trees and vibrant gardens, a stark contrast to the barren desert I'd escaped. This is incredible, I said as we pulled up the long gravel driveway. How long have you owned all this? Built it from nothing over 25 years, Samuel replied, pride in his voice. Started with 80 acres and a used tractor, but I'm not getting any younger. I want to ensure the ranch can sustain itself long-term. That's where you come in if you're willing. Samuel showed me to a modest but spotless guest house behind the main residence, complete with a kitchen, bathroom, and cozy living area. After the day's ordeal, it felt like a palace. A phone sat on the kitchen counter, and Samuel gestured toward it. If you want to call your husband, let him know you're safe. That's your business, he said. But think carefully about what you want to say. Men like that have a way of talking women into giving them second chances they don't deserve. Alone in the guest house, I stared at the phone, torn between rage and fear. Part of me wanted to scream at Marcus, demand answers, but a larger part dreaded what he might say. Would he laugh it off, claim it was a joke, or somehow make it my fault? Instead, I called my grocery store supervisor and quit, a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. That evening, Samuel brought a stack of financial documents to the guest house. I warned you I'm flying by the seat of my pants, he said with a chuckle, spreading tax returns, profit and loss statements, and investment portfolios across the table. As I reviewed them, my dormant analytical skills stirred, like a part of me waking up after years of sleep. The ranch was profitable, but there were untapped opportunities, tax advantages, investment strategies, and expansion possibilities glaring from the pages. You're sitting on a gold mine, I told Samuel after hours of analysis. But you're barely scratching the surface of what this could be. Samuel leaned back, studying me thoughtfully. Show me, he said. Over the next 3 hours, I outlined a comprehensive business plan, crop diversification, investments in agricultural technology, and a marketing strategy to sell directly to high-end restaurants and organic distributors. By the time we finished, Samuel looked at me with awe. Where did you learn all this? He asked. I told you, I said, a spark of confidence reigniting. I was studying finance. 2 years later, I stood at the podium of the Grand Ballroom in San Francisco's St. Francis Hotel, addressing an audience of the world's most powerful investors. My company, Desert Bloom Capital, had grown from managing Samuel's ranch to overseeing $500 million in assets, specializing in sustainable agricultural investments that outperformed the market. Ladies and gentlemen, I said into the microphone, my voice steady and authoritative. Sustainable agriculture isn't just the future of farming, it's the future of smart investing. My recommendations had transformed Samuel's ranch into a multi-million-dollar operation, and word of my success spread, attracting clients across 3 states. I'd bought a mansion in Napa Valley, drove a Tesla, and was featured on the cover of Agricultural Investment Quarterly. The scared, abandoned woman at the Barstow rest stop was gone, replaced by someone unstoppable. Midway through my presentation, a commotion erupted at the back of the ballroom. Security guards struggled to stop someone forcing their way in. "Rebecca," a familiar voice shouted. "This disappearing act ends now. You need to come home." The room fell silent as Marcus pushed past the guards, striding down the aisle toward the stage. He looked older, thinner, desperate, his clothes wrinkled, hair unkempt, eyes wild with a mix of anger and desperation. "You can't just run away from your marriage," he yelled. "I've been looking for you for 2 years. Do you have any idea what you've put me through?" I paused my presentation, looking down at him calmly, the eyes of 300 influential investors watching. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice clear and unshaken, "I'd like you to meet Marcus Collins, the man who abandoned me in the Barstow Desert, 315 miles from home, because he thought my dependence on him was amusing." The audience gasped, investors exchanging shocked glances. Marcus's face paled as he realized he'd interrupted a room of California's financial elite. "You're embarrassing yourself," he stammered, his confidence crumbling. "Come home and stop this gold digger charade." James Whitfield, a billionaire investor, stood up. "Excuse me," he said, his voice dripping with disdain, "but did you just call one of our most successful fund managers a gold digger?" The room buzzed with outrage as security flanked Marcus. "Gentlemen," I said to the guards, "please escort Mr. Collins from the building and ensure he's not welcome at future events." As they led him away, still shouting, I returned to my slides, continuing as if nothing had happened. Within days, Marcus's outburst went viral, shared across social media as an example of toxic behavior. Nathan's wife, Jennifer, filed for divorce, unwilling to stay with someone capable of such cruelty. Austin's girlfriend, Ashley, ended their relationship with a public letter detailing her disgust. Their parents, Frank and Carol, were ostracized from their Phoenix church and relocated to Oregon to escape the scandal. All 3 brothers lost their jobs, blacklisted from California's financial industry. Marcus was fired from his accounting firm within 48 hours, and they faced mounting legal fees from lawsuits, including my civil case for emotional distress and abandonment. They resorted to minimum wage jobs under assumed names, their reputations irreparably damaged. As I rang the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange for Desert Bloom Capital's latest fund launch, I reflected on how their cruelty had forced me to discover my own strength. Sometimes, the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best. I was grateful every day that Marcus showed me who he truly was before I wasted any more years trying to please him. Please feel free to comment below if you liked this. Remember to like and subscribers for more.